So in the last area, and there were, again, many abstracts on this topic, oral and posters, and what I've done here is just list some examples of information that we've been looking at. And so tomorrow we're excited. We will hear the presentation for the CANDOR trial, which is obviously daratumumab, Kyprolis dex versus Kyprolis dex, and even in the abstract, we know that obviously the triple therapy is superior. A number of important things about that it does work in lenalidomide exposed and lenalidomide refractory patients, which is an important point. But then we have these other combinations which are potentially usable for a similar patient population. So I'm going to take you through some of the results with these other agents just to look at the response rates and some of the outcomes, just to see what you guys think are the most promising right now. The one on the bottom there, it was a smaller abstract that was presented this year. I don't know if you even saw that. It's a radioisotope I-131 combination, which is linked to a lipid raft target. Quite interesting new approach, which had some new data. So if we just look at some of these survival curves and survival outcomes, again, the Dara-Pom-Dex, very active combination, and is now approved for use, which makes it very helpful. We have Carfilzomib-Pom-Dex, also a very active combination, although it's not specifically approved, but is one that can certainly be widely used. Then the new CELMoD, Iberdomide, I think for me a quite interesting response data, even in, as you can see here, IMiD refractory patients. And so even although it's sort of like an IMiD, clearly there are some different features to it that make it active, and quite interesting in the Dara-Pom refractory. So I'll be interested in how you view those data moving forward, and I think pretty well tolerated. I think makes it helpful for use across the board and in different settings. And so we really do have an amazing number of options, and I just created this table here. When all else fails, we have a number that are currently available, and then all of these different drugs. And quite frankly, I wouldn't like to be the FDA and be trying to decide where I set the bar to approve or not approve all these drugs that are coming forward, very frankly. So how do you look at this space? How do you feel about these different new options, especially for early disease and then for later disease? Maybe you want to start first, Joe.
Yeah, it's impressive, isn't it? I mean, it's almost the same thing we were discussing earlier. The more options, frankly, the better. And you know, we have each of these major drugs and class of drugs, and now we can combine them. You know, my approach, Brian, Marie-Vie, so often is sometimes even tell patients what I call the 1-2 punch. You know, meaning your first line therapy and your second line therapy or your therapy at relapse. Those two things together are really critical in the long-term survival of a patient. You know, this idea of sort of saving the best for last has really been almost removed from our vocabulary.
Right.
Yeah.
But
so we don't want to overdo it.
But still needs to be emphasized.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's important. And I think some of the data you just showed really helps us with that. So if we're not quite on the cusp or not quite there right now that a lot of patients are getting Dara VRD or Dara KRD. So if the average patient today is still getting a VRD or maybe a KRD-like regimen, transplant or not, lenalidomide maintenance, we want to think very strategically at that first relapse that we want to give them something very potent. And I think that's where CANDOR comes in, the late-breaking abstract we'll hear about tomorrow. The idea of we definitely want to use a new class of drug with daratumumab, and we can combine it with different things. We've been combining with pomalidomide right now, but I think there is an attraction to combine it with carfilzomib as well. Even though we can overcome lenalidomide resistance with POM, you know, there are a lot of patients I think who could really benefit from Dara-CAR. And that's the nice thing about having those options that you listed.
Right.
In one patient, we might determine that Darapomdex is better. Another patient, Daracardex may be better, like in the Candor regimen.
Right.
And so that principle of using really the best we have early on, I think, remains very important, and this facilitates some of that.
Right. And so one aspect of that with the Candor combo is that you have Dara and then you have Kyprolis. Now, the Dara is not sub-Q. And in the study, the Kyprolis is two doses.
Twice a week, yeah, but this is because it's a registration study, and the control arm has to be Carfil, so maybe 56 milligrams per square meter twice weekly. But I think that after the approval of this combination, people is going to switch to Carfil, so maybe just once weekly, because it's equally effective and definitely much more convenient for the patient. So I agree with you, although I would like to challenge a bit.
It's about time we have some controversy.
Yes, well, yeah, challenge
because,
Joe, yes.
You said that, okay, after almost all patients are going to be LEN refractory right now after the first line of therapy, and you would choose KD, DARA, Pomdex, DARA, or even KPD. What about the BCMA, monoclonal antibodies, or even the CAR-Ts for these patients in first relapse? Do you see
it's not much controversy because I agree with you. I think part of the challenge is just when they're available, absolutely. I think that will be another approach. But I think the concept of bringing in a different mechanism of action and a very potent drug, I think daratumumab and carfilzomib have proven themselves. These ones are soon on the cusp. But you're right, it will make us start to think that I would have almost thought of it as kind of the next round. So let's pretend we're a year in advance, we've shuttled ahead in time, and now we're using DVRD or DKRD up front. Then you're going to be saying, okay, at first relapse, do I want to use a BCMA product?
Absolutely.
Do I want to use one of those? So in your strategy, I completely agree. I'm just not quite sure that the BCMA products that we've been using are quite ready for first relapse in a broad sense. Absolutely, they should be evaluated in trials.
Yeah,
and in fact, some of the things that you noted, Brian, with many of the Chinese CAR T-cell trials, because of access in the country, many of those trials are actually testing CAR T-cell in the U.S. market was typically first or second relapse because they haven't seen carfilzomib, they haven't seen daratumumab. So it's proving the principle in a different geographical region.
Right, but the other thing that is true for them is that actually it's a very efficient and cost-effective option because you have a decisive therapy, and frankly, some of these combinations are very expensive, and then you need to keep taking them. And so there are a number of things that...
you sound like the transplant argument, right? Which always was, it's a little bit more upfront, but then it's a one-time treatment, and there isn't that ongoing maintenance. And hopefully if CAR-T can bring us to the point where we can stop treatment. Right. For many of my patients who have gone through our CAR T-cell trials, and this isn't always in every patient, but many of our patients, not only do they enjoy the fact they've had a nice deep response, they like the fact that they actually go on a drug holiday.
Absolutely.
The fact that many of them are off treatment. One of my patients I saw recently, he's like, Doc, I have known you, you've been taking care of me for a decade.
So this
is the first time I'm off everything, and they love it.
This is the same for my patients that have received CAR-T, because most patients are at late advanced stage of the disease, and they've been coming to the hospital every week or every other week for maybe 5, 6, 7 years.
And so
the first time that they have holidays after a treatment, and in fact, most of them in complete response.
So
despite the fact they love seeing us,
absolutely,
they're happy to not be there.
They appreciate very much this progression-free survival, although they recognize that sometimes the PFS is not very long like right now, but they appreciate a lot of this progression-free survival because, as you mentioned, they are for holidays of treatment.
So I think that maybe we're suffering from this idea that we're perhaps expecting too much. We thought maybe it would just be the treatment we needed to cure myeloma, but if you look at it, the benefit is probably 2 or 3 times more than we see with a new agent. We've had all these new agents approved recently with response rates and benefit, which is not nearly approaching this benefit. So
Right, 'cause
maybe we
would-
just need to look at it a little differently.
Correct, and part of it is I think, we've been comparing to some of the lymphoma and leukemia situations, which are really different diseases.
Yeah.
Right.
Adolescent or ALL is a different disease than
Yes,
multiple
completely
myeloma, and
different.
that's a very much more uniform population. Their T cells are not nearly as exhausted as myeloma patients' T cells are, and so it's different. But you're right, even when there was some skepticism seeing 10, 11, 12 months of PFS,
Right.
that's still so much better than, honestly, as we know, their life expectancy after that many therapies
Right.
is perhaps sadly only 3 or
Yes.
4 months. So to
Absolutely.
be able to put someone in remission for the better part of a year, over a year, is significant. I agree.
Absolutely, and I've had this exact same reaction that you described from patients. They're just so pleased to
Yeah.
be not coming in for treatment and feeling good and in a very solid remission. It is actually amazing.
Because one of the trends of the last few years, I think, is that, because we're using more intensive treatments, as we've gone from doublets to triplets, maybe to quadruplets, as we've seen the benefit of maintenance therapy, many myeloma patients, even many listening tonight, are going to think, I am just going to be on treatment for the rest of my life.
Right.
Yeah.
But we hope that these
Yeah.
strategies of MRD negativity,
Indeed.
of CAR T cell therapy agents, have the benefit of being able to take patients off treatment. Because,
Absolutely. You
as I
gotta-
joke and say, my favorite drug, nothing,
Nothing.
right?
Absolutely.
Is patients are very
Right.
compliant. Patients, the cost is really good.
Yeah.
And the side effect profile is impressive.
Perfect.
But
Perfect,
it would
yes.
be really nice if we can
So-
draw that for many, provide that for many of our patients.
So we just have a few moments left. So there's some other drugs that were presented at this meeting, like melflufen, for example, where they have some quite strong response data and the like, and seems to be reasonably well tolerated. Well, what do you think about this agent moving forward?
Yeah, melflufen is a new agent. I would say that it's a new alkylator. Maybe this is not the correct way. Just is an alkylator targeting aminopeptidase that are overexpressed in the plasma cell. So my idea is that at the end is a more targeted therapy, and the concentration of alkylator within the plasma cell is higher than when we use the conventional melphalan. Melflufen is effective, and I have a quite high number of patients treated with melflufen. Late advanced stage of the disease, even refractory to pomalidomide, refractory to daratumumab,
So this is important.
and they respond. Approximately 1/3 of the patients respond. The median duration of response is approximately 4 or 5 months, and we've seen a significant activity in some patients with extramedullary disease.
So
What
really
is
important.
relevant, because sometimes we don't know how to manage patients at late advanced stage of the disease with extramedullary disease. I've seen how the plasmacytomas dramatically disappear with just one cycle.
Right. So this is important. Yes.
It's an alkylator-like drug, and of course we have to take care also about the myelosuppression, especially the thrombocytopenia, because it's severe in many patients, and it's reversible, but sometimes we have to wait for some weeks or even months to be recovered,
Yes.
as well as the asthenia, not many gastrointestinal toxicity, but well, definitely the clinical development plan is based on the combination of melflufen with safe drugs like bortezomib or daratumumab, and we will see what happens.
Okay, very,
And
very
I'm
good.
quite interested in the data you showed with the iberdomide,
Yes,
the
okay.
cell
Yeah.
Yes.
modification agents. I think there, it was very conveniently taken. The patients that I had on the study were, very, it was not a very difficult thing to take, not dissimilar to the days of taking pomalidomide for them,
Yeah.
many would say.
Yes.
And we saw, I think, quite an impressive response rate from it. And there are even next generation of those cell mods
Right.
coming that
Yes.
seem to be at least early work in the lab.
At least one
seem
or
to
two,
be
yeah,
particularly
impressive,
impressive. And then, of course, probably the next approved drug potentially for multiple myeloma is going to be isatuximab,
Yes,
which
of
will be
course.
another CD antibody, very similar in many respects to daratumumab, will likely be approved in combination with pomalidomide. Which is an
It's
important
important,
arena
very
in that
important.
later relapse that you've
Absolutely,
described.
absolutely.
Part of the challenge will be a lot of those patients have already seen both DARA and POM, so we'll have to figure out exactly how that works, but that could definitely be a good option for our patients
Yeah,
in the near future,
definitely.
especially with later relapse.
Absolutely. Well, I think that we've really covered the waterfront from smoldering to active with all kinds of options. And so I really hope that this has been a very, very helpful and interesting presentation for all of you watching tonight. And as we close out, I would like to thank you for watching, and then once more, I would just like to thank you all for supporting us, including our sponsors again, Amgen, Takeda, and Janssen Oncology. So thanks to my guests for this evening, Mary V. Mateos and Joe McHale.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.